Thumbelina. Once upon a time, there was a kind and gentle woman who lived alone in a small cottage. She longed for a child but had no luck. One day, a kind old woman came to visit her and gave her a tiny seed, saying, "Plant this and you will receive the gift of a child." The woman was grateful and planted the seed in a pot, tending to it with care. Soon, a beautiful flower bloomed, and in the center of the flower there was a tiny girl, no bigger than a thumb. The woman was astonished and delighted by the tiny girl and decided to name her Thumbelina. Thumbelina was a sweet and gentle child, and though she was small, she was full of life and curiosity. She lived happily with the woman in the little cottage, playing with the flowers, birds, and butterflies in the garden. But Thumbelina's tiny size often caused trouble. She would ride on the back of butterflies or drift in a leaf boat across the garden pond. One day, as Thumbelina was singing a sweet tune while sitting on a lily pad, a large toad hopped over to her. He was enchanted by her beauty and wanted to make her his bride. He told her that she would make a perfect wife for his son and insisted that she come live with them in the swamp. Thumbelina was horrified and refused. "I do not want to marry your son," she said, trying to escape. But the toad was determined, and before Thumbelina could flee, he scooped her up and took her to his home, deep in the swamp. The toad's home was dark and damp, and Thumbelina was miserable there. She cried every night, wishing for freedom. One day, a kindly fish heard her sobbing and told her that it would help her escape. The fish caught the toad by surprise, and as it darted away, the toad dropped Thumbelina into the water. She floated away to safety, but now she was alone and had no home. Thumbelina wandered through the forest, searching for a place where she could be safe. She came across a field of flowers and decided to take shelter under the petals of a large daisy. But she soon realized that winter was approaching and she would not survive the cold. Fortunately, a kind field mouse appeared and invited Thumbelina to stay with her. Thumbelina gratefully accepted. The mouse's home was cozy and she offered Thumbelina a warm bed. However, the field mouse had a friend, a rich and pompous mole who was always visiting. The mole was curious about Thumbelina and was soon smitten with her, despite her small size. He asked the field mouse if she could arrange a marriage between Thumbelina and himself. Thumbelina, terrified of the mole's gloomy, dark home, refused again. But the mole was persistent. He insisted that Thumbelina marry him, but she couldn't bear the thought of it. Desperate to escape, Thumbelina fled the mouse's home and ran as fast as her tiny feet could carry her. She spent days wandering through the fields, forests, and rivers, always seeking a place where she could be free. One evening, she stumbled upon a beautiful garden where birds chirped and flowers bloomed. In the garden, she found a swallow who had been injured by the cold winter winds. Feeling sorry for the swallow, Thumbelina took care of him, nursing him back to health. In gratitude, the swallow promised to take her to a warm place, far from the troubles of the swamp and the mole. Thumbelina was overjoyed and climbed onto the swallow's back. Together they flew across the skies, over mountains and rivers, until they reached a beautiful meadow. There Thumbelina discovered a lovely garden where all the flowers bloomed year-round. It was the home of the flower folk, tiny beings who resembled Thumbelina in size. They welcomed her with open arms, delighted to meet someone like themselves. Thumbelina spent many happy days in the garden, dancing and singing with her new friends. But one day as she was walking through the garden, she met a handsome young prince, a tiny man just like herself. He had been searching for Thumbelina for a long time, for he had heard the stories of the beautiful girl who had been born from the flower. The prince had fallen in love with Thumbelina at first sight, and Thumbelina, who had longed for love and companionship, felt the same way. The prince asked her to marry him, and Thumbelina, overwhelmed with happiness, agreed. The wedding was a grand celebration, attended by all the flower folk, the swallow, and the many animals that had helped Thumbelina along the way. Thumbelina and the prince were married in the heart of the beautiful garden, and they lived happily ever after, ruling their tiny kingdom together. As the years passed, Thumbelina and the prince had many children, each one just as tiny and lovely as she had been. They created a life full of love and joy, surrounded by the beauty of nature. Thumbelina had finally found the home and happiness she had always dreamed of, and she never again had to worry about toads or moles or being trapped in a dark and lonely place. Moral of the story: Thumbelina teaches us that even though life may present challenges and obstacles, kindness, courage, and perseverance will lead us to a place of happiness. It also reminds us that no matter how small or seemingly insignificant we may feel, we all have a unique beauty and purpose in the world.